Two superstars, one city, championship expectations, and somehow, no finals appearances. This is the story of how the Los Angeles Clippers, a franchise that finally looked ready to take over the NBA, failed to reach the finals despite landing Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. We'll break down how this team went from title favorites to what if, the mistakes that doomed them, and the moments where everything could have gone differently. Stick around until the end, because the real reason the Clippers never reached the finals isn't just about injuries or bad luck. It's about how a franchise tried to buy greatness before building a foundation. It all started in the summer of 2019, when the Clippers pulled off one of the biggest moves in NBA history. Kawhi Leonard had just finished one of the most iconic playoff runs ever. He led the Toronto Raptors to their first championship, hit the legendary four-bounce shot against the Sixers, and looked unstoppable on both ends of the court. He was at the peak of his powers, and every team in the league wanted him. Meanwhile, the Clippers were desperate for an identity. For decades, they'd lived in the shadow of the Lakers, the other team in Los Angeles. But when Kawhi agreed to join, only if they could trade for another superstar, the Clippers went all in. They mortgaged their future to acquire Paul George, trading away Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, and 5 first-round picks. Overnight, the Clippers became championship favorites. The team's defense looked elite. Their bench was stacked with players like Lou Williams and Montrezl Harrell. The city was buzzing. Everyone believed this duo would finally lead the Clippers where they'd never been before, the NBA Finals. On paper, it was perfect. But championships aren't won on paper, and that's where the problems began. From the start, there were signs that the chemistry wasn't right. Kawhi Leonard's quiet, reserved leadership clashed with the team's more outspoken personalities. Paul George missed time early with a shoulder injury, slowing down their ability to build rhythm. Meanwhile, role players who carried the team before the stars arrived, like Lou Williams and Harrell, struggled to adjust to reduced roles. Behind the scenes, reports surfaced about frustration over superstar treatment. Kawhi and PG had their own workout schedules, their own routines, and sometimes even sat out practices. To be fair, both had earned that status. But the lack of chemistry showed in big games. The team could never string together consistent performances. They'd look dominant one night, then disinterested the next. By the time the 2020 playoffs arrived, the cracks that were once invisible had become fault lines. And then came the moment that defined their entire era, the 2020 NBA bubble. The Clippers entered the Orlando bubble as one of the favorites to win it all. They were deep, talented, and rested, but the chemistry problems followed them inside. After taking a 3-1 lead over the Denver Nuggets in the second round, the Clippers completely collapsed. They blew double-digit leads in games 5, 6, and 7, and lost the series in stunning fashion. Kawhi Leonard shot just 6 for 22 in the elimination game, and Paul George infamously hit the side of the backboard on an open 3. It wasn't just a loss, it was an embarrassment. The team imploded under pressure, and the NBA world roasted them for it. Memes, jokes, and Pandemic P headlines took over the internet. After that, head coach Doc Rivers was fired. The locker room dynamic was shattered, and the Clippers' super team image was officially broken. The bubble collapse wasn't just a bad playoff loss. It was the moment that shattered their aura of invincibility. Even when the Clippers tried to bounce back, something always went wrong. In 2021, Tyronn Lue took over as head coach. He brought a new voice and a calmer culture. The Clippers regrouped and started to play like a team again. They made it to their first ever Western Conference Finals, the closest the franchise had ever come to the finals. But even that run came at a price. Kawhi Leonard tore his ACL in the second round against Utah. Without him, Paul George did everything he could, leading the Clippers past the Jazz. But they fell short to the Phoenix Suns in 6 games. Injuries continued to haunt them. Kawhi missed the entire 2022 season. Paul George missed significant time with elbow and knee issues. And every time both stars looked healthy, it never lasted long enough. By the 2023 and 2024 seasons, the pattern was clear. When one returned, the other got hurt. When both played, they were elite, but that window never stayed open. The Clippers didn't lose because they weren't good enough. They lost because they could never stay together long enough to prove it. And the most painful part? The Clippers gave up everything to build this team. To get Paul George, they traded away Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, now an MVP-level player, and 5 first-round picks. That deal locked them into the Kawhi PG era, no matter what happened. Their championship window became short, expensive, and risky. When injuries struck, they had no draft picks to rebuild, and no cap flexibility to make big trades. The franchise spent hundreds of millions building around these 2 stars, including their brand new arena, the Intuit Dome, expecting championship banners. Instead, they got early playoff exits and years of what-ifs. Now, they didn't just gamble on 2 stars, and they gambled on time, and time ran out. Even when healthy, the Clippers lacked one thing championship teams always have: identity. Kawhi Leonard is a silent assassin, efficient, calm, but not vocal. Paul George is talented and skilled, but not the kind of player who commands a locker room. The team never had a clear leader who could hold everyone accountable during the tough moments. Compare that to teams like the Warriors, Nuggets, or Heat. All have a voice, a tone setter, someone who sets the standard. For the Clippers, that leadership gap meant that when things got rough, there was no one to rally the team. The mental toughness wasn't consistent. They could dominate regular season games, but when the lights got brightest, they folded. Talent wins highlights. Leadership wins championships. And that's what the Clippers were missing most. So what's the legacy of the Kawhi and Paul George Clippers? It's one of the biggest what-if stories in modern NBA history. What if Kawhi stayed healthy in 2021? What if the chemistry had clicked earlier? What if the front office had kept Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and built more depth? There were moments where it looked like everything might finally come together. Huge wins, highlight performances, playoff comebacks. But every time, something went wrong. The Clippers had everything: star power, coaching, defense, and support from ownership. They were supposed to be the franchise that finally broke the Clippers' curse. Instead, they added to it. When history looks back at this team, it won't remember the talent. It'll remember the opportunity lost. Conclusion: the legacy of unfulfilled potential. When Kawhi Leonard and Paul George teamed up, the Clippers weren't just chasing a championship, they were chasing respect. They wanted to rewrite decades of failure and finally become equals to the Lakers in their own city. But 5 years later, there's no banner, no finals appearance, and nothing but questions. They were never bad. In fact, they were often elite when healthy. But greatness isn't about moments. It's about consistency. And the Clippers never had it. Whether it was chemistry, injuries, or leadership, something always stood in their way. Now, as both stars age and free agency looms, the Kawhi PG era feels like it's nearing its end. A chapter that started with so much promise might end as one of the biggest what could have been stories in NBA history. The Clippers didn't fail because they didn't try. They failed because sometimes, even when you have everything, it still isn't enough.